Welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. Week 11 is in the books. It's a boys' show today. It's the muscle show. Let's get into it.
I just want to rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Yes, we are back. The boys are back. Paul's showing off his guns to anyone watching the video. Mags is not, but he's going to show off his lyrical chops for everyone listening to the audio, his mental chops. It is the last boys show before Mum returns next week. Week 11 is in the books, and I am joined by the best two from Fantasy Wildcard, my wonderful, beautiful co-host, Paul. How are you doing?
Oh, it's Monday. I've got Lewis. I've got Mags. The Cardinals are on top of the NFC West. The 49ers lose. The Chiefs lose.
Didn't see it.
Wait, it's like Christmas Day. It's like Christmas Day.
Well, with that, I'll bring in our wonderful guest, reeling, not used to what it's like to seeing his team lose, something Paul and I have gotten very used to this season. Although Cardinals first place, Rams second place, all to play for. Mags, how are you doing off the back of that incredible loss?
You're right. It's been a long time since I've seen the Chiefs. The Chiefs is last year. I got pretty used to it during the season. Actually, like the Chiefs weren't great in season last year, and like I said pre-show, going into it, I was like, I don't know, like this Bills team are real good. So I was half expecting it. No shame in losing to the Bills. Another great game to watch. We'll just do what we always do and beat them in the postseason. It'll be fine. How are you doing, Liz?
I am good, thank you. We never ask the host how they're doing. This is why you're a professional.
It's because Paul has no manners.
Paul was too busy flexing to ask how I'm doing.
Yeah.
I had a great Sunday. I thought this last slate was really fun. I thought there were the amount of long touchdowns, the amount, Jerry Jeudy exploding out of nowhere, Nick Westbrook-Akini, not even to talk about it being Taysom Hill week. A question to you both before we start. Did you start Taysom Hill anywhere?
No, I don't think so. Taysom Hill's more of he's a best ball guy for me. I don't think I have Taysom Hill in anything outside of best ball. I might have one. I'm not sure though.
I don't have any Taysom Hill in Dynasty. I don't have any Taysom Hill in proper redraft. Where I do have Taysom Hill is in my top 30 on the leaderboard Scott Fishbowl roster, where he has not made the lineup up until this week.
Nice.
Trey McBride was on bye, Cade Otton was on bye, and so with 64.81 points in my tight end spot, Taysom Hill has made his one appearance of the season, and I will never play him ever again.
That's it. Yeah. Someone's won that Millie Maker contest with Taysom Hill in there as well, right? He's made people a lot of money this week.
100%. 100%.
I'm worried about the Scott Fishbowl. I'm nervous.
Why are you nervous?
I'm on 12 and 8 overall.
So you need one win in this. It's the last week before we go into playoffs, isn't it?
This is it. I need one to make the playoffs. If I miss it, I'm done. And so far, quite a low scoring week because my team's fallen apart with bye weeks and everything like that. I need 14.3 points from how do you say his name? Fairbairn, the kicker, and Jalen Tolbert.
Ooh. Fairbairn is the number one kicker in the NFL for fantasy right now. Fun fact.
So I need 14 points from him to get the win over the other guy's team has finished. So I need 14 points for him, or I need 18 points to beat the league median. So literally, I just need one of them to come in to make the playoffs.
I drafted Christian McCaffrey, Rashi Rice, and Chris Godwin, so I'm screwed. Like I've been out of it for a while. Like, yeah. I was doing well for a bit, and then it all fell apart.
Yeah, I
started
have
well,
one.
drifted off because I had Puka Nakua, so I started well, and then it just went a bit crap, but it's sort of come back up now.
Yeah,
I have one league where my tight ends are George Kittle, and it's a I think I must be 14-6, somewhere around there, where like I'm probably making playoffs, but it might even be 12-8. I might be like slightly closer to the bubble than I want to be.
Yeah.
Tight ends are George Kittle, obviously up until this week, the tight end won on the season, but then ruled out relatively late. I have Noah Fant, who was injured this week, and I have Theo Johnson, who's on bye. And so I found myself that, George Kittle was only ruled out on Sunday. We only found out very, very late that it was even a risk of him not playing, and then he missed the game entirely. So I found myself today trading Keaton Mitchell for Dalton Schultz, and I need 2.5 points from Dalton Schultz. And it is tight end premium, so that's one catch for 5 yards, and I'm still worried.
Yeah, he should be okay. He'll get that, right? He'll get that.
Also, I have started Taysom Hill somewhere, and I've started Taysom Hill in a league that all three of us are in.
Oh,
the league of Extraordinary Hatchetman.
Oh, nice.
And I've got my tight ends were Sam Laporta, Brock Wright, and Taysom Hill. So I went with Taysom Hill, and I am on the brink of like sneaking into the playoffs. And I'm playing Liam, FSA tweet, shout out to Liam, who is in the 6th spot, and I'm in like the 7th or 8th. So I need to beat him to sort of be in that playoff spot. And we're not going to talk about the fact that Mags was trying to fleece me out of all of my picks and everything and buy players cheap off me because he was like, "You're not going to make the playoffs because your team's shit. That's true. Me your best player."
I didn't even know what league that was in. I just guessed, right? I could have sent you a message up for any league, Paul, right? I just guessing.
You know what I mean? trying to buy Matt Stafford and Jamar Chase.
Oh yeah, I did try and buy Jamar Chase as well. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I told you I was on the brink of playoffs, you were like, "Okay, I'll come back in a couple of weeks when you haven't made it and buy Chase off you then."
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I love you, Max. You know what I mean?
I think I was also in discussions with Lewis about buying a quarterback. I ended up going with the Weatherman instead. Weatherman offered me the best deal for a quarterback in that league. So shout out, Matt.
And I'm not gonna lie, you massively overpaid. You wanted to underpay me, and then mate, you know what? Gotta have.
Let's get into the big news of the week on that.
Mags overpaid for Baker Mayfield because he saw the weatherman's eyes and just went, "I'll pay you anything, Matt. I love you."
I know. Yeah, exactly.
As we've seen this week, Matt, having left the wild card, is the favourite member of every single other remaining wild card member.
Yes.
Although the food they had did look nice.
The leader took out Matt, the one that doesn't do podcasts anymore. You know, what about the rest of us, Kev?
Yeah.
We all want hickories, Kev.
I thought you said hickey there.
We want that as well, Kev.
We have some bye weeks this week.
Yes, we do.
And then we have some very big news. So the bye weeks this week are actually quite fancy relevant. Well, the first half of them are especially. So we have the Falcons, the Bills, the Bengals, the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Saints. The Jets and Jaguars obviously are also on bye for the rest of the season. You are unlikely to start a huge amount of players from them. Although, when we're going to get into one of our sections here, there's a Jets player doing way better than I thought. Then I was putting together the show sheet and there was no big news. And then from far off in the distance, from over the Atlantic, just from the edge of New York, there was a little bit of a bell and there was a little bit of some Italian music playing in the background. And Daniel Jones has been benched and they have not turned to Drew Lock. Which, as a side note, why the fuck did they sign Drew Lock? I don't understand why they did that if he wasn't then going to come in if Daniel Jones underperformed. But Tommy Cutlets himself, Tommy DeVito, is the starting quarterback in the NFL for the New York Giants. Does this so? Yes, Paul.
Can I just say that Daniel Jones isn't even the backup? They've said that Drew Lock is remaining as the backup. So Danny DeVito is starting. Drew Lock is the backup. Danny Dimes has dropped to QB3 on the Giants team.
Wow.
How bad are you as an NFL quarterback? Well, I'm worse than Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock. Okay.
You'd feel so aggrieved if you were Drew Lock that you were the backup, the starter's been benched, and the third string has been elevated over you to start.
I think it's time to hang up the cleats.
We did call it on this show last week as well, fellas, right? Let's call that out as well. But everyone was shouting for Drew Lock, and we were like, what about good old Tommy DeVito, right? Don't forget about him. I was very excited. I was more excited about seeing his agent again, which I can't lie, I still am. That's the only reason to watch the Giants this year, is to see his agent.
Well, can I also just say that the week before, my rewind prediction was the Panthers beat the Giants and Daniel Jones is benched.
Ooh.
I was a week too early with that one. Good.
Well, I do want to ask a couple of questions around the Giants before we move on, because obviously they have a couple of fancy relevant pieces. Wandale Robinson has been more relevant than it feels like he should have been, but particularly Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy, obviously both breakout rookies. One of them we anticipated, one of them, those of us who loved Tyrone Tracy coming out of college might have seen coming, but, was drafted very late on. And to come to you first, Mags, do you think this Tommy DeVito news is anything good for either of them? If the quarterback play might get better, or if they might have to lean on the ground game a little more for Tyrone Tracy? Do you think it's net positive, net negative, or just neutral?
Daniel Jones is so bad, it's hard to say anything other than neutral, right? That's kind of the level they've been playing at. You would assume it's good for Tyrone Tracy, but he's been doing really well anyway, I suppose. So I would love to say that it's going to be good for Malik Neighbors, but I don't really know. I need to dig into the numbers to see how well all the receivers did last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was that DeVito was starting. But instinctively, I'm thinking it's good for Tyrone Tracy more than anybody else.
It's normally the feeling, isn't it? When the quarterback play gets worse. Although this is a benching, this isn't an injury.
Yeah.
You tend to lean on the ground game. How about you, Paul? Do you think Malik Neighbors potentially dead for the season, or maybe even a dynasty buy if people are out on him, or do you think Tommy Cutlets is going to drive him to fantasy success?
Do you know what? It's really difficult. So I'm looking at Tommy DeVito's numbers now. From last year, he played 4 games where he had 100% of snaps. And his best game was his second week, and that was 246 yards, 3 touchdowns. If he could do that, I think Malik Neighbors, he's somebody that demands the ball. He's somebody that's going to get the ball. He's safe. But you look at his other numbers. The week before, he had 86 passing yards. The week after, 191, 158, 177. They're not numbers that you go, oh, this is, Malik Neighbors is safe. So, to be honest, I'd like to see more of what he can do in that. Give him 1 week. Let's see what he's about. Let's see if he is going to throw the ball and if Malik Neighbors is his guy that he's going to go to. As for, is Malik Neighbors like a dynasty buy at the moment? I'd say not, because the community were really high on Neighbors, and a lot of smart people would just sort of sit back and go, I'm not going to sell him cheap now because Tommy DeVito's come in. I'm going to sit on him, because if they can bring in the right quarterback next year, whether it's draft one, whether it's, trade for one, whatever they do, his value can skyrocket again. We've seen what he can do. He can He can catch the ball 12 times in a game. He can go for 100 yards. He can score a touchdown. With the right quarterback, he's somebody that you could argue is a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. So you're not going. If you own him, you're not going to sell him cheap now.
Completely agreed. I don't want to ask the question about, is Tommy DeVito someone you can look to pick up in your Superflex leagues? Because I think if you are in a position where you are considering starting Tommy DeVito, I think just call it a day. I think chances are it's unlikely to be a playoff roster. You've lost Dak, you're replacing it with Tommy DeVito. I think there's no world in which I'd be willing to do that.
Yeah, he's kind of the rare instance with quarterback where just play a running back in your super flex instead. Like he'll score less points than a good running back.
Sorry, I just want to add, if you want to clarify that, go back to a couple of weeks ago and listen to the Wildcard Dynasty show where they played a game called Who Scored More Points Than a Kicker? And it proved to be that actually you could have started, I know you can't in a super flex, but you could have started a kicker in that spot and he'd score you more points than certain quarterbacks. And, running backs are up there. So don't feel the need to start a quarterback because it's a super flex position.
Daniel Jones only had 10 more points than a kicker. I think it was very close between Daniel Jones, actually.
I love it when you play that game. I want to get you on. I want to get you on next year in the off season and play a game, kickers and do a whole show based on who scored more points, this kicker or that person, and
love it.
Amazing.
Let's do it. I'm in.
Shall I sack off the next feature of top 5 wide receivers and top 5 tight ends, and we'll just talk about top 10 kickers and how reliable they've been?
Yes. Yes.
Make kickers relevant.
We are going to continue where we left off last week, where we talk about the top wide receivers and tight ends and look into whether there's anyone there that you think is surprising, anyone there that you think it doesn't, sometimes I think an interesting conversation here is about whether or not someone feels like they should be there. So we're going to start off with the wide receivers. I'm going to read through the top 10, but anyone that you feel you want to comment on, because I think this is a really interesting one. So the top 5 wide receivers is Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, and Drake London. Now, obviously, these were all being drafted, if not in the first, around the 1-2 turn. So it wouldn't feel like it would be a huge amount of surprise. But Garrett Wilson, to me, is the one that stands out. I don't think Garrett Wilson feels like he doesn't feel like he's been the wide receiver 4 on the season. What are your guys' thoughts on Wilson?
Go on, Matt.
Yeah, whenever you see that, you're like, did he get 100 points for that catch? Did they just go here's loads of extra points because that catch was so good, Garrett? It doesn't seem. I think it's because the Jets have been so awful that it's hard to kind of see the fantasy points behind Garrett Wilson. But he's there. You can't argue with it. He's sitting right there. I think his form has dipped a little bit whenever it comes to Devontae Adams coming in, so he is slipping down. I think maybe that's why we haven't seen it as much as before. But yeah, he's one that stands out to me where you're not openly thinking he's smashing it. But the wide receiver position this year has been hit really heavy with a lot of injuries as well. So a lot of the time, Garrett Wilson's in there every game. He's catching, 8-9 catches every single game. That's enough to get you up there at the minute. If you look at the wide receiver list, I looked at it earlier today. I think Chris Godwin is still a top 15 wide receiver. That shows you just how barren it is at the minute in terms of injuries and people not being able to be on the field. So that's got to play a big part in it as well.
He's wide receiver 14 and he hasn't played since week 8.
That's mad.
The rest of the top 10, so it's rounded out by CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 6, Zay Flowers, Terry McLaurin, Darnell Mooney, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. Paul, is there anyone there in particular that there's one there that I think definitely feels like we wouldn't expect them to be in that top 10 when we drafted at the beginning of the season. But is there anyone particularly there that you want to talk through?
So I want to ask you a question, Lewis. can you remember back to the off season? I can't remember his name. There was this guy that was like
I know
a
what you're going to
content
say.
creator
I know where this is going.
basically absolutely smashed this wide receiver. Oh, what was his name? That's right, Drake London. And said everyone's like buying him and everyone's getting all going, oh, he's got the best QBs. And he said he was still shit. Did you say he was wide receiver 5 on the season?
He is.
Yeah. Can you remember who that content creator was?
I think it was their little Magsy.
Oh, yeah, it was Mags, right. So, Mags, how do you feel about Drake London being wide receiver 5? And I don't throw injuries as an excuse, okay? And I know what you're like. Oh, yeah, there's lots of injuries. If all these players were playing, he wouldn't be there. But he is, okay? He is.
He is.
He's there.
Yes. He is wide receiver 5, wide receiver 13 in points per game. And I got that part wrong. It seems like, although he is wide receiver 28 over the last 3 weeks, just throwing it out there, the part that
you keep putting him in your fantasy game day. Okay,
I know, right? That's been working an absolute treat. What one of my main points was in terms, I know this isn't a dynasty show, but it was in terms of his dynasty value. Whenever I sent that tweet out in the offseason, Drake London was being valued like he'd already had this season and broken out. He was wide receiver 10 on Keep Trade Cut at that stage. Now that he has broken out, he's wide receiver 11 on Keep Trade Cut now. So his value has actually gone down from where it was in the offseason because people were so excited. So that was the main crux of my argument. I did say quite clearly I thought he would improve. I didn't think he'd improve this much, but we'll see where he is at the end of the season.
Yeah, I just like to remind you of that one. To be fair, but
don't worry, the internet's reminding me, Paul. Don't you worry.
I'm waiting
at least one retweet a week.
I'm waiting for you to be brought up on fantasy receipts, like something like that, and just
I'll go quietly if I'm wrong. I'll go quietly. That's fine.
You've already accepted your thing, and you've got a good excuse. But the guy that really stands out for me, it's not just Drake London, it is Darnell Mooney.
Yeah.
For me. And that to me seems like absolutely bonkers. And if I'm honest, I don't think anyone had 2 Atlanta Falcons wide receivers being in the top 10 wide receivers after 11 weeks of the NFL season. Nobody saw that coming. So that to me is probably the biggest shock for me.
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time. There's quite often the conversation in the offseason about like, can this offense sustain 2 top 24 wide receivers? And I think if you'd said that, there was an offense with 2 wide receivers in the top 10, you'd immediately be looking Rams, Bengals, Eagles, like you'd be looking at some of those elite combinations. You would not be thinking Darnell Mooney would be doing this. It's been a great surprise for anyone that took him, very late in a startup or last few rounds of best ball. Anyone have anything else they want to talk about on the wide receivers, or are we happy to move on to the tight ends?
I just wanted to throw in.
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Sorry, Mags. I was going to say, I just want to throw in like exactly what you were just saying there, Lewis, about how you talk about teams that can sustain 2 wide receivers. Now, I know they've been struck with injuries, but Eagles, I don't know, it just feels like they've got. I'm trying to find AJ Brown, wide receiver 29, and I know he missed 3 weeks at the start of the season. So he played 1, wasn't back then till week 5. And he's had a good run since then, but it just feels like, the Eagles was one of them teams that we were sort of going, they can sustain 2 top 10 wide receivers, and they just don't even seem to be even in the mix. It just seems crazy.
I haven't seen a need to throw the ball because Saquon's just running over everybody. We don't need to throw it. He's just crushing it. I did have one thing to ask. Sorry. The one thing I did have to ask about this is obviously it's really useful to have your season-wide rankings, but I wanted to ask you guys, how much do you look at form compared to full season kind of results? So if we look at the last 3 weeks, the top wide receivers does look quite similar. It's got Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown at 1 and 2. Cooper Kupp is currently in third. He is third in points per game as well, though, so it's kind of an injury thing for him. Again, another example. But then you have Courtland Sutton and Jackson Smith and Jigba as the fourth and fifth most in-form wide receivers. At what stage do you start considering somebody like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's flying high right now, wide receiver 10 the last few weeks, ahead of someone like Garrett Wilson, who's sort of plummeting, or Drake London, who's less in form? Like, how do you build that in? Because I always find that a little bit trickier.
I definitely think it's something you have to, because obviously we take a look at weekly matchups and we don't tend to reflect too much on like, okay, well, how have they actually been performing recently, until it's like an individual start sit decision. And I think part of the difficulty with it is the availability of data, right? So for you to go through and do that would have been using an online tool where you can figure out the per game average of the last few and then sorting through from there.
Yeah.
If there was something within Sleeper that you could look at and go, what's been who's had the top points per game in the last 3, in the last 5, and in the last 7 weeks, it will be much easier to be like, oh my God, this player, has had an absolute blow up.
Yeah. Even
though they're still ranked quite low, they've been elite the last few weeks, or even, the other way around. This player started hot and now they're doing absolutely nothing. It comes down to feel, like I said earlier. I definitely think I think it's something I do take into my start sit decisions. I think I would take it more into my start sit decisions if it was easier to see the form of a player.
So I've got an interesting thing now. I wish that trading happened more in like redraft, and I understand it's really difficult because like when you trade in Dynasty, it's easy because you've got picks and stuff to play with, whereas in redraft you haven't got that. But for me to sort of like agree with, like to go with what you're saying, Mags, when you start looking at it, like to me, the Denver Broncos seem like a really decent team this year. And they're scoring fantasy points. Bo Nix is just having an absolute wonderful season. Like that's quite a shock to everyone. But then if you look at somebody like Courtland Sutton and like you said, Jackson Smith and Jigba, these two are people that are really flying at the moment. So if you could trade in redraft, I'd be like, do you reckon if I had CD Lamb in my team that I could flip CD Lamb for Courtland Sutton and Jackson Smith and Jigba and go, do you want to make this trade? Because I'm trading like a high-end wide receiver, like one when you draft it. But actually, I haven't got much faith in CD Lamb for the rest of the season with your Cooper Rush or your Trey Lance. You're kind of a bit like, if I'm in a team that I've got CD Lamb, I'm kind of worried about what I'm going to get. But I could turn, 15 points for CD Lamb into, 10 points for Courtland Sutton and 10 points for Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's more points in my team from one play. You know what I mean? And it's just sort of doing that, and it's turning them players and sort of keeping on top of things. And that's how you win a redraft league. You're always active. You're always moving. Dynasty, it's easy to go, I'm completely out of it this season. Full rebuild, sell off these players. I've got idiots trying to buy Jamar Chase off me because I'm not going to make the playoffs and stuff like this. But it's in redraft, it's trying to be like, right, I need to keep pushing, because you can't get to that point and go, right, I'm in rebuild, because you build your team every year, so it's trying to stay active and trying to look at things like that. And I think it's really important in redraft to be keeping an eye on players that are performing and players that you don't have faith in. Like you said, Garrett Wilson, how much faith have you got in him? They brought in Devontae Adams. The Jets completely suck ass. And, then he started really well, but he's dropping off now. Courtland Sutton didn't start as well, but they're really starting to gain momentum now, Plenty of points on the board. Who would you rather? Garrett Wilson, Courtland Sutton? Would you do that trade straight up? Garrett Wilson for Courtland Sutton? Yes, I would. Give me Courtland Sutton. I'll take a shot with him. I love it.
I think it's a really interesting point, and I think it links into something that Mags brought up last week about sort of the dynastification of redraft, that I think people look more at elite assets as if it matters to have the elite asset than they do the fact of how many points they're actually going to score you each week. Like, I think, if you were to put together a team right now, and CeeDee Lamb's a great example of it as someone that, even though he's currently the wide receiver 6, but feels like he's quite disappointing. But if you were to put together a team that would have looked good before the season and offer it to someone as a team that looks good now, people tend to still look towards that beginning of the season rankings because that's what they felt coming in the same reason that people, CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, probably two of the best examples of it as first round picks that haven't worked out this season. But even up until this week, like Breece Hall, people still, it takes so long to adjust to, the actual realities of a player. And we're heading into week 12 and people still can't really get on board with what a player's outlook actually looks like. So I think it's a very, very interesting point, Paul. Let's crack on with the tight ends. So I thought this was very interesting. The top 5 tight ends on the season. Tight end 1, Brock Bowers. At 2, George Kittle. Obviously missed the last week. In 3, Travis Kelce. Trey McBride in 4. And Cade Otton in 5. I'll go through the rest of the top 10 for you. So Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, and Mark Andrews. Very interesting one. Paul, let's come to you first. Was there anyone in that list that you think it feels very strange that they're on there?
Yeah, I think for me, Dalton Kincaid is doing really well.
He didn't play. He's been injured. Leave Dalton alone.
Oh, sorry. You didn't mention Dalton Kincaid. I thought you might have as tight end one. No, so for me, I think the biggest shock for me in this list, honestly, is Cade Otton. Yeah. I don't think anyone expected him. I think he's a good tight end, and I think, our fellow co-host Hannah absolutely loves Cade Otton, and she was picking him last year as like studs and everything like this, and she was there. She got it right, but I don't think she ever expected him to be, after 12 weeks, tight end 5 on the season. And he's actually got a game. I'm looking at his numbers here. He's got a game week 2 where he scored minus 0.4 points. You know what I mean? And it's like, week 1, 1.5 points. Week 2, minus 0.04. And it's like, 2 weeks in, people were probably dropping him and going, this guy, he's garbage. Now he's tight end 5. And so that to me is a big shock. And I think the other one that's going to really shock everyone is Jonnu Smith. I think he's another one that everyone, like, nobody apart from Lewis, and you were here for this show, good friend Bob Lung, that was talking about his consistency, and his consistency basically said Jonnu Smith at the Miami Dolphins, his consistency numbers are really high, and he was somebody that he was trying to get everywhere, and bam, go on, Bob, nailed it.
Absolutely. So starting with Cade Otton, I think it's a really interesting thing about sort of situation over talent. Like, Cade Otton's fine, but Cade Otton is Pat Frymouth, is Cole Kmet, is Hunter Henry, is big body tight end, good in the red zone, very little yak, good blocker, very good all-round player, but not a fancy star. Cade Otton suddenly finds himself in a very passing heavy offense with the 2 main weapons going down, and then all of the other weapons that, you remember that week where it was like, is it Jalen McMillan? Is it Trey Palmer? Is it Sterling Shepard? It was Cade Otton. It was just Cade Otton the whole time. And I think it's a really interesting thing with him, that it's just a case of, I don't think Cade Otton has improved as a player. I think he's just a reliable catcher who's good in the red zone, as a lot of tight ends. I think he's just suddenly found himself at the top of the depth chart with the top 2 weapons going out, and with an OC who is way more pass happy than the Bucs have been in the past, but also than a lot of those other teams that I mentioned with those other tight ends. Mags, what about for you? Brock Bowers is a very interesting one as tight end 1. Is that someone you were in on before the season?
Yeah, Brock Bowers is one where I could not wrap my head around why people were annoyed at the landing spot for Brock Bowers. It's like, no, this is literally a perfect landing spot. Like, you're going with a quarterback who has literally got one other person to throw to, Devontae Adams, who isn't going to be sticking around for a long time. Turns out a lot less than we even thought he was going to be sticking around for. So it's just like, and it's weird how some things about the cracks, people are like, he's undersized, he's like this and that. It's like, Brock Bowers is an absolute stud. Yeah, so it's like, what is going on here? Like, did anyone watch this guy play in Georgia? He crushed it as a freshman the whole way through. Yeah, and I thought it was a perfect landing spot, and I'm not shocked at all to see Brock Bowers up at the top. I'm glad we finally put this absolute nonsense to bed about how rookie tight ends cannot produce. That has been a myth for years, as we spoke about last year with Sam Laporta and other people coming in. Like, we've seen that these guys are playing like this in college. They're coming into the NFL, and they're quite happy to become, elite pass catchers right away. Brock Bowers already on like 700 yards. He's going to be the tight end one by the end of the season, I would expect. I would love to see him go over 1,000 yards as well. I don't think we've seen it. I don't even know if Sam Laporta did that last year. I know Kyle Pitts did that in his rookie season. I don't even know if Laporta cracked 1,000 yards. I would love Brock Bowers to be able to. But, I mean, the whole tight end position outside of like Bowers, Kittle, Kelsey at the minute, it's just like fart noises, right? It's just like, could be anyone. Like, it's just like... I was just flicking through on Fantasy Pros, like just in like that 3-week form chart we spoke about, just going through random 3 periods. Here are some of the names that appeared in the top 5. Josh Oliver appeared in the top 5 at one stage. Tucker Kraft, Theo Johnson. I mean, just fart noises, right? It's like, who knows? You need one of those elite guys, or you may as well just pick whoever is playing like the Chiefs who can't defend tight ends at the minute. Just pick a matchup.
Yeah. Mad. Oh, it's nice to see Brock Bowers emerging, and it's nice to see a different name at the top. Although, watch Kelsey now go on a run and finish his tight end one again. Let's get on to our regular features. So we're going to start off by talking about what we learnt in week 11. We're a rewind show. We're going to rewind on the week. Mags, I'm going to come to you first. What did you learn last week?
So, tell me what all these players have in common, right? Javonte Williams, Anthony Richardson, Jerry Jeudy, and Taysom Hill. All over the last few weeks have been... No, well, obviously, yes. And they've all been, like, buried at some point in the last few weeks where they're like, they're done for fantasy. They'll never start again. They're off their teams. Javonte Williams. Audric Estime is the guy now. He got all the carries. Williams is done. Top 10 running back on the week. Anthony Richardson. He's benched. Joe Flacco's the guy. Richardson's never going to play again. Top 10 quarterback on the week. Jerry Jeudy's a scrub. Never going to start him again. He's done. Another team. Boring. Top 5 wide receiver of the week. Taysom Hill. Don't know when to start him. Can't trust him. Just a god, right? Last week. It was Taysom Hill week. So I kind of learned, try not to completely put people as dead and buried until they're, literally like retired and done, and like they're real. Like, I think Allen Robinson, we can say, is done, right? I think that's fine. So try not to be Allen so Robinson harsh on
in 2024.
Right, I know, right? So he's the first name that came to mind for definitely done, but still technically playing. So try not to be so harsh on some players and think, right, I don't want to just completely bury them just in case there's a chance that they can come back.
I think that's a really interesting one. And the Estime one was really interesting this week, that everyone was just going, Javonte's dead, Estime's the guy. And then, I mean, Estime mostly saw work on passing downs, which is very strange. He had 3 targets and 3 receptions, but Javonte was just straight up the bell cow again.
I just like that the Broncos have looked at it and be like, see that Sonic and Knuckles thing they're doing at Detroit? It's like, why don't we just go Knuckles and Knuckles? Let's just double up.
Just go Knuckles and even bigger Knuckles.
Yeah.
Paul, what did you learn from week 11?
Well, I was gonna talk about how it's very similar to Mags, and it was how, like, the fantasy community, after one sort of bad game, just get out on everyone. And I probably, I've been victim to this week, and Audric Estime was going to be the guy that I was talking about. How Javonte Williams last week played 29% of snaps. That was it. He had 1 rushing attempt for 1 yard. He had 2 catches for 6 yards. And you were like, this guy's dead. And everyone was crazy for the waiver wires. Pick up Audric Estime. Start him everywhere. He's going to be the guy. He's going to do it and everything like that. and he completely crashed and burned. Now, another guy that was the same, that sort of everyone was like, no, he's done. I don't think you mentioned him, Mags, was Jordan Addison. And everyone was like, he's done. You know, he had 8 targets this week. I know he only brought in 3 of them, but he got 61 yards and a touchdown. And he's finished as wide receiver 18 on the week. And it's just sometimes these players can have a bit of a bad run, but don't be completely out. And I know I'm kind of like repeating what Mags is saying here, but I think it's really important, and it is really important at the moment. But at the same time, tread carefully, because we're not here saying, right, next week, start Jerry Jeudy, start Taysom Hill, start Javonte Williams, start Jordan Addison, start Anthony Richardson. I'm not saying go and put all of these in your starting lineup, because the chances are they're not going to hit every week. But don't be so out on them that they are dead and buried. You know, they have one bad week. It's not right. Drop them. They're pointless. They're no use. They're not going to do it, because the week after they proved you wrong, and then you're scraping the waiver wire. You know, if you'd have dropped Javonte Williams, you know what I mean? If you'd have dropped Javonte Williams this week and then he goes out and do that, and then you're like, oh, crap, actually, he is some kind of relevance. And, you know, you're now scraping the bottom of your fab barrel, hoping that you could get him back. And the Broncos play the Raiders next week, you know? So for me, Javonte Williams is probably somebody that I'd be looking at starting next week, because if he can do that against the Falcons, he's probably going to do it against the Raiders, who are trash. So just tread carefully with these players.
It's a really interesting thing about kind of moderation. And, you know, we don't immediately look at Jerry Jeudy or MVS and go, these guys are superstars, start them every week when they have one blow-up game. So we need to not do the same the other way around. If someone has one terrible game, we don't immediately need to discard them. Nice interlinking things that you've learned this week, guys. The thing which came to mind for me is, I think as fantasy players, we can forget that defenses exist. And I think we forget, it's like in the gambling industry as well, I very rarely bet on unders. You know, it's not fun to bet on unders. You think about, how is this game going to explode? Who's going to score all these touchdowns? If you look across the slate, there are multiple games which were really exciting, which hit the under. So Seahawks, 49ers, Commanders, Eagles, Packers, Bears, and then the really big one being Ravens, Steelers. And I think we forget about the defensive matchup a lot of the time. We think about how things are going to be very exciting, and we don't think about the fact that the defense exists as well. And, you know, in the last 2 weeks, the Steelers defense have shut down Jaden Daniels and Lamar Jackson. Like, it's something that you really need to take going forwards. That, you know, and these games can still be interesting and players can still have fancy relevant weeks, but like, defenses exist. And we know which ones are good at this point, and we know, you know, which matchups to then avoid. So I do think it's something to bear in mind.
Can I tell you something really funny about that with what you were saying, like with these big games? Joe Burrow has thrown 9 touchdowns against the Ravens this season and lost both of the games. The Steelers just beat the Ravens without scoring a touchdown.
Oh, amazing.
You know what I mean? And that just goes to show that you can score on the Ravens all day, but if you're not going to defend against them, they're going to score back at you. You're not going to win a game. But if the Steelers, who have actually got a decent defense, have gone out there and they've turned over the Ravens without even scoring a touchdown. And that stat just made my day.
I love it.
The Bengals are so crap, man. I can't wait to have Hannah back.
Do you know what? What was really amazing about last night is the Bengals lost in overtime. But
shocker.
Joe Burrow, who is in my home dynasty league, scored 3 touchdowns and everything like this. Because when I checked it, because I was up early this morning, when I checked it, it was at half time. They were 24-6 down, and I was like, shit. Completely out of it in my home dynasty league. And that, obviously, as we all know, that's the most important one. Completely out of it. And then all I'm getting is these sleeper notifications. Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, who's also in my team. Joe Burrow to T. Higgins. Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. And I look, and all of a sudden now, I'm back up there and back in the game. And I've got CJ Stroud to go tonight. Like, and it's like, you know what? I love you, Bengals. You scored loads of points and still fucking lost.
Absolutely. Well, talking about scoring loads of points and losing, that is the nature of our regular features, our stud, scare, and wildcard, where the highest points loses. So each week we have these 3 regular features. We are doing a competition this year. The loser who has the most points, who is the most wrong each week, has to open the first show after the Super Bowl with a monologue of the other 2 hosts choosing. I hope you're excited for that monologue, Paul. This week, to be fair, I actually think this might be the second week in a row that we all get 1 point and the entire thing becomes worthless. But if we got an extra point for being the most wrong, well, we'll get there when we get there. So the studs this week. I mean, I did very badly as well. So I went with Mike Williams, again, looking at the high over under, looking at the susceptible defense. He had no catches. So I am taking the point for this one. Paul, you said Ramondre, who was the RB18 with 11.9 points. Low scoring running back week. Mags, you said Roma Dunze, who was the wide receiver 32, 6 catches for 65 yards. So yeah, I'm obviously taking the point for this one.
Is that what you meant when you said you get an extra point for being the most wrong? So you said your stud of the week was Mike Williams, who got 0.
Yeah, wait until we get to your scare.
He wasn't. He wasn't. I wouldn't be having
You know what I mean? I could have got more points than Mike Williams this week in the NFL.
You sure?
Yeah.
I would love to see you lining up against the Ravens. Like, that would be very fun to watch.
Let's go.
Yes. Is your stud of the week yourself, Paul, this week?
Oh, let's do it. Let's do
Love
it.
Paul, who have you actually gone with?
So I've gone for Nick Westbrook-Akini as my stud of the week this week. For anyone that tunes in to the Dynasty Hot Seat and the worst Dynasty team ever rebuild, I suggested to my good friend Mags that he should start Nick Westbrook-Akini the week just gone, and he went for absolutely insane touchdown. And I messaged Mags to gloat straight after as well. But actually, Nick Westbrook-Akini is actually having a relatively good season, and I think people are not really seeing this because they do this thing where they look at how they're getting on from the season. Now, he started the season with nothing and then had a bye week in week 5, so I'm not really taking much from then. So since week 5, he is actually wide receiver 24. He is averaging 11.8 points per game, which is fairly average. And he's only had 1 week since week 5, which was week 10, where he didn't score a touchdown. And that, to me, is just somebody that is very much going under the radar. People are not really seeing it. And now that Nuke Hopkins has sort of gone out of Tennessee and it's Calvin Ridley, it's sort of, I feel like Nick has got into that point where he is probably second choice receiver in that team. And I just think he's somebody that sneakily he could be very, very an easy sort of 10, maybe 12-point week. If you need a safe player, he's somebody that you could put in that safe spot. But I'm going for him as a stud this week. I can't wait. They play against Houston, and I think they're going to have to throw the ball to stay in that game. So, come on, Westbrook-Akini.
I really like this one, and I love us choosing to go with someone who is, going very much under the radar and someone who is underperforming. Max, who have you gone with?
We kind of brought it up earlier, like how these Eagles wide receivers are really underperforming at the minute. Devonta Smith, currently wide receiver 26 on the year, and he's been fully healthy the entire year. It's not due to injury. He's going up against your Rams, Lewis, who, at least according to StatMuse, who I'm going to trust, the worst defense in the league versus slot receivers, and we know Devonta Smith can be an absolute weapon out of the slot. I'm hoping that the Rams run defense will be so terrible that they don't just run over the Rams all the time and do actually end up throwing it. But I think Devonta Smith, he's so good. Like he's due a big week. It seems to be the perfect time, the perfect place, the perfect defense. Hopefully not for you, Lewis, but yeah, for Devonta Smith, yeah, this seems to be a bounce back week potential for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of it and maybe it's just my Rams bias trying to find a reason why this is actually a good thing. I think part of it why we're so weak to slot wide receivers is because of how good the pass rush is, and it's because of that need to get the ball out quickly if you're going to have success against this pass rush.
Yeah.
Which means that you end up feeding a slot wide receiver, and I can absolutely see Devonta Smith, it ending up being one of those stat lines which is like 9 receptions for 76 yards and wide receiver 11 on the week because it's just everything going underneath. I've gone really the other direction. So I've gone with Alec Pierce against the Lions. And this is basically you're hoping for one play. This isn't a volume-based thing. I find the Colts really interesting because up until this season, we thought Michael Pittman was the best wide receiver on the Colts. Now I'm not even convinced he's a top 3 wide receiver on the Colts. And part of that is just the chemistry, but also the fit, the profile fit with what Anthony Richardson wants to do, that Josh Downs, Adonai Mitchell, and Alec Pierce especially really, really fit. They're obviously playing the Lions. Now, the Lions are good against wide receivers. They're a good defense. But my main rationale here is that they are going to be playing from behind against this dominant Lions offense, especially with how bad the Colts are at defending the run. And therefore, Alec Pierce, one deep touchdown, for 70 yards. And suddenly he's, a top 20 wide receiver on the week. So there's my thinking. I'm hitching a ride on one play, which I tried to do with Mike Williams, and that didn't work. Our fancy scare of the week, a hyped-up player who we think could be disappointing for the week to come. Mags, you went with the Hannah theory of going with Jamar Chase, and it didn't work out. He was the wide receiver 4, but it was the worst of both worlds because they still lost. I went with Aaron Jones, who was the running back 36 on the week, so pretty good week for me. And nice. Paul, you, for the second time this season, have managed to pick out the number 1 player at the position, going with Jared Goff, who was quarterback 1 on the week. Any thoughts? Any comments?
Nope.
Okay.
No comment at all.
I'm going to throw to you first here, Paul, because just a little peek behind the scenes. Paul's notes on the show sheet, he just wrote, "I don't want to play anymore." Have you got a scare for us, or are you just not playing?
I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
If it makes you feel better, I went up against the Goff Amon-Ra St. Brown stack in my home league this year. I just got annihilated, and I was feeling great because I had Saquon Barkley play earlier in the week. I was like, sweet, like I was counting the win already, and then just got absolutely crushed.
My favorite thing about that league, because I'm in that league with you, Mags, is that one of the guys commented and he put replied to his Jonnu Smith pickup, and he went, "What a pickup!" And then the next thing was him picking up Danny Jones, and then the next thing was him dropping Danny Jones and picking up Danny DeVito, and I was like, wow, this kind of thing has escalated. You're praising yourself for how good you were for this pickup, and then you're criticizing yourself for picking up Danny Jones, and I was like, that's just amazing. Love it.
I thought you were going to talk about the message I put in, which is like, please stop, Jared. I just put that in last night. It's like, just being crushed. It's like, please, I'm just seeing like my green bar on Sleeper just going tick, 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 and then it turned red, and then it's, oh no, like just awful.
What I love, to be honest, okay, I know I picked the number one, and whatever it is, what it is. But what I love about it is, even though they were absolutely battering the Jags, they were like, "Yeah, Goff, go out and do more, go out and have fun." Didn't bench him. Didn't go like, "Oh, do you know what, John Goff? We're like 20 points ahead now, and this is easy. Just have a rest." They were like, "Just go." Kill them some more, keep shooting at them, like,
I love it. That's Dan Campbell. Like, do not take your foot off their neck. Like, I love it.
Yeah, mate, I love it. Yeah. Genuinely, absolutely love it. I've got time for it. It's just every time they get the ball, it's not like, oh yeah, let's like wind the clock down. It's if we can have 4 plays and we'll be in the end zone again, let's go. Love it.
But do you actually have someone, Paul?
Yes, I do have a fantasy scare, and I'm going to, because one of my things this year that I learned is Hannah is always right. Okay, so I'm going to take Hannah's sort of theory here and go right. If Hannah does this, it's a win-win for me. So I'm going to say Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. Okay, and I'm going to go if he's crap, if he's crap, I'm going to be so annoyed, but I'm going to win and get the point. But if he's amazing, we're probably going to beat the Seahawks and stay at the top of the division. So I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr., okay?
I thought you were going to pick a Bengals player because they're on bye.
No.
Like, they'll definitely not score any points.
To be honest, I feel like there are a lot of players that on bye that you're like, wow, there's so many players I could pick from there, but...
I'm a big fan of that one, and I like the Hannah theory.
Hannah's always right.
Max, who have you gone with as your scare of the week?
I've gone for it. I mean, we talked about names shocking to see in certain positions. Chuba Hubbard is running back 11 on the year. I just think he's going to turn back into a pumpkin at some stage, surely. And I think Kansas City so good against the run. This could be the week. We might even see a little sprinkling of Jonathan Brooks this week as well, which could be interesting to see what that does to Chuba Hubbard's production. I just think this might be the decline on Chuba, sadly.
Yeah, I can absolutely see it. Like that Chiefs run defense. I mean, aside from James Cook last night, like they can shut down opposing running backs. I've gone with Brock Bowers, and obviously a place that you often tend to start here is to look at, points against the position that you're picking. And I don't want to use points against the tight end position for Brock Bowers because he doesn't play as a conventional tight end. They're playing the Broncos this week, who are one of the top defenses against particularly the wide receiver position, but just in terms of points allowed. And I would be stunned if they do not send Pat Surtain to cover Brock Bowers. That is the number one threat on the Raiders, and I think he is going to see coverage from, let's be honest, probably the best man corner in the league for the whole game. It will be interesting. I love when you get matchups, which is like, a few years ago, Tyreek Hill versus Jalen Ramsey. We don't have that many elite corners at the minute because of Sauce Gardner's drop off. But like, I love when you get to see this like truly 2 elite players going up against it. But I think there's a chance that the Broncos will just try and isolate. Okay, you're not beating us through Brock Bowers. Try and beat us through something else. So I think this could be an interesting one. Let's close it out with our wild card of the week. And I think we're in for a scrap here because I can see the comments that you've made here, Mags. I said the Steelers would beat the Ravens, which was right. I said that Drake London would finish outside the top 20 wide receivers, which was also right. Good job, Lewis. Paul, you said the Colts would beat the Jets, which was correct. You also said that Jonathan Taylor would have over 100 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, which he didn't. So that's 1 right. Max, you said there'd be more away wins this week than home wins. It was 5 away wins to 7 home wins. So close, but not quite. You also said Mahomes would be the quarterback 1 on the week, and he was the quarterback 17. So my feeling is that Mags gets a point here, but I'll let you argue your case.
Well, first of all, Patrick Mahomes is number 1 in my heart. So he was quarterback 1 somewhere on the week. So let's start with that. I'm just here on behalf of Hannah, so I I can't leave the last part in this show without fighting my case for Hannah. She'd be very disappointed in me, so I'm going to give her my best shot, guys, okay? On the show sheet, it says, the less likely, the better. Lewis, your choice was that the Steelers beat the Ravens. The Steelers were at home, and the spread was 3 points. And they came into the game with the same amount of wins. So I would not say that's a particularly wild card pick. Drake London sucks, so he was obviously going to finish outside the top 20 wide receivers. So again, not a wild card pick at all. Paul, you said the Colts would beat the Jets. We agreed 2 years ago Aaron Rodgers was a washed piece of shit, so I don't even know why that counts as a wild card pick at all. And then your other one, that didn't quite come true. Whereas I was taking, more away.
So, Lewis, I've muted Mags because he's talking.
And then Patrick Mahomes to be quarterback one overall. Right?
Okay.
So
don't come on our show and think you can stand here and go.
Listen, Paul, this is my show because I can mute you as well, all right? So why don't you be quiet? So, Hannah, I'm fighting for you. I'll let you maybe bring it up next week because I don't think I'm going to have any success. But I think I actually stayed true to the wild card pick purpose, unlike these two jokers above me who decided just to play it safe. What do you think, guys? Do I still avoid the point?
Well, what I think we can do, Mags, is because ours weren't very wild, we will halve each of our correct points, right? So instead of getting 2 points, I'll get 1 point. Instead of Paul getting 1 point, he gets 0.5, and you still get 0, which means you had the least correct points, and you lose on the week.
What? Knock him out of the park, Louis. Get him, boy.
I can't accept that. My client is not here, Hannah, to speak on that. I have to speak to my client before accepting any deal like that.
Yeah, Mags, listen, okay? Listen. What we'll do, we're all here to be politically and correct and everything like that. So we'll vote on it, okay? Who thinks that Mags should get the point?
So anyone opposed to that? Who thinks that Paul?
Mags has got the point. We're moving on. We've already gone over an hour.
I think that's fair. Sorry, Hannah. I tried.
Sorry, Mags. You let Hannah down there massively. You let Hannah down.
Mags, I'm gonna stick with you. What is your wild card for the week this week?
Oh, it couldn't be anything else, Lewis. Tommy DeVito gets the job done, and the Giants win. I don't even know who they're playing, but he's going to beat them. It's going to happen. Who are they playing?
Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, even better. Tommy DeVito crushes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then I thought, you know what? In honor of Taysom Hill absolutely smashing it last week, I'm going to say at least 5 quarterbacks are going to join Taysom Hill, and they're going to have a rushing touchdown next week.
Love it.
Love that. Paul, what do you have for your wild card of the week?
So, again, using the same strategy as I was earlier, I think the Seahawks, the Rams, and the 49ers all win.
Are all 3 of those favorites, by the way, by any chance, Paul? This is your wild card pick where you pick 3 favorite teams again to win.
The 49ers are playing the Packers, the Rams are playing the Eagles, and the Seahawks are playing the Cardinals.
The Seahawks would be favorites against the Cardinals, surely.
But, mate, you know, the Packers are not a walk in the park, and the Rams versus the Eagles is no walk in the park, is it really? You know what I mean? They're all tough games.
I think we're underdogs.
But I'm saying all 3 win. And if I'm wrong, that means that, you know, the Rams will win and the Niners will win and the Seahawks will lose. So hopefully, you know. So if they all win, that'll leave all teams in the NFC West as 6 and 5. Which I think will be quite interesting going into week 13 with all 4 teams on the same record. And I also think that 2 different players from the Broncos will score a rushing touchdown this week as well.
Absolutely love that. I think the last one especially, I really like the Broncos one.
Yeah.
I've gone with, and you can tell me if you don't think this is wild enough. I think the Panthers-Chiefs is going to be a one-score game. I think that's going to be closer than people think.
Oh, it's the Chiefs game. They're all one-score games, right? It's sadly, I think will be right, Lewis, but I still think it's a wild for sure.
I've also said Jameis throws 2 or more picks, but if that's not wild enough, I'm genuinely happy to go up to 3.
I think
that
2's quite a lot, right? In general, like you're not throwing 2 interceptions even Jameis isn't going out and throwing. Who are the Browns playing?
It's the Steelers.
Oh, maybe you should go to 3. No, 2's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it at 2. But there you go.
Yeah.
That's going to bring us to a close. Before we do, thank you so much, Mags, for joining us these last couple of weeks. It's been great fun having you on. If people would like to hear more from you, where can they find you?
They can go check me out on Twitter, or I've gone over to this Blue Sky place as well, Lewis. I can't see any discernible difference between it, apart from people seem to just tweet out or sky out saying, "Oh, I love this place." It's just to seeing people going like, I don't know. I'm on there if you really want to find me on there. Go subscribe to the Dynasty Odyssey YouTube channel. 2025 rookie mock draft starting way too early. Go check out who you might be looking at next year in your fantasy teams. And also, as Paul mentioned earlier, if you're into Dynasty, rebuilding the worst Dynasty team ever. It's so bad, I am praying I get Tommy DeVito off the waiver wire. So that's how bad we are. Go check it out.
Can absolutely recommend. I love Mag's work on YouTube, and the way too early rookie mock drafts are very helpful for me starting my off-season process. But that is going to bring us to the end of the show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on X at Wildcard Rewind. Head on over to our YouTube channel, search for us at Fancy Wildcard Podcast Network, and make sure you give us a like and a subscribe. And we will see you next week.